This ragged little girl was about to become the adopted daughter of a noble duke. And yet, at this moment, she could not feel happy at all. The girl was afraid that everything before her was only a dream. Once the dream ended, she would have to return to that hell where she was abused. Her name was Mint. Ever since she could remember, she had lived in an orphanage. Every day, all she faced was overwhelming labor and endless beatings. Small and frail, she was like a withered blade of grass that could snap at any moment. Yet the greedy headmaster still blamed her for failing to bring in sponsorship. With just one ruthless shove, the girl's body slammed heavily into the wall like a piece of rag. Her miserable choking cough failed to stir even the slightest sympathy in the man. Sickly and weak, she was thrown into a pitch-black storage room just like that. The girl still did not know that her fate was about to be completely changed by the arrival of Duke Ecdonia. The frail Mint was forcibly brought to the hall, put on display like merchandise for others to choose from. The girl raised her little face in terror, only to meet the man's icy gaze. Urius looked down from above at this child, who only came up to his waist. Those emerald green eyes were exactly the ones he had been searching for. He told the headmaster, without hesitation, "I want this child." This was the first time Mint had ever been chosen by someone. Everything felt unreal, like a dream. By the time she came to her senses, she was already sitting in a carriage leaving the orphanage. The girl secretly glanced at the man sitting across from her, his luxurious formal attire, silently declaring his noble status. Mint stared in a daze for a moment, only to be noticed by Urius. Startled like a frightened rabbit, the girl could only nod stiffly in response to the Duke's questions. The man had not expected this child to be so timid. After all, on the battlefield a few years ago, she had been the fearsome villain of the Kara cult. Yet the girl seemed to remember nothing. Urius cautiously asked whether she knew anything about the war. The girl then repeated honestly what she had heard to the man before her, which confirmed for him that she had truly lost her memory. The man pressed on, asking whether she knew why the war had ended. The girl who knew the answer lit up as if her eyes were glowing, and she told the Duke admiringly that it was a brave knight who had defeated the cult villain. She had heard that he had beautiful blonde hair and eyes as brilliant as gold. The more Mint spoke, the more she felt that the knight she described was clearly the man before her. The girl froze for a second, but just then the carriage suddenly stopped. Urius leapt gracefully out of the carriage, then turned and gently extended his hand to the girl. Mint looked at the grand ducal mansion before her, gorgeous like a castle, her heart filled with both longing and fear. In this absurd society, nobles adopted children from orphanages, only to play a doll game. Most of the sponsored children were exceptionally good-looking. They were both slaves and pets. Having just been adopted, little Mint began to worry about her situation, because her guardian, Duke Urius, was only 7 years older than she was. She did not think that such a handsome and noble man would need to adopt a child to inherit his estate. But compared with that hellish orphanage, the girl still wanted more to stay in the Duke's residence. However, her first meeting with the servants did not go smoothly. Everyone kept talking about the Duke adopting a girl this old. The butler did not even spare Urius's dignity, speaking out against it on the spot. Dirty all over, little Mint stood awkwardly surrounded by everyone. Faced with the butler's aggressive questioning, the girl could only shake her head lightly in confusion. Furious yet helpless, the butler could only arrange for a maid to bathe the girl first. The gentle maid carefully helped the girl remove her outer clothes, but stopped when she saw the scars covering her back. Mint thought it was the smell on her body that disgusted others. She flusteredly said that she could wash herself. The maid quickly hid the pain in her eyes. She smiled and comforted the girl. Then she used an even gentler touch to wash her body. This was the first time little Mint had ever felt warmth from another person. After bathing, the girl changed into a soft robe, and her delicate features made her look especially adorable. The maid even thoughtfully made her a cup of warm cocoa. Mint took a small sip, and the sweet taste almost melted her heart. This was treatment she had never enjoyed in the orphanage. The girl was still immersed in that happiness from moments ago, when the sudden sound of the door opening made her whole body tremble. The cocoa in her hand spilled all over the floor. Seeing the carpet she had stained, little Mint froze instantly. She hurriedly dropped to her knees, bowing her head over and over in fear. In the orphanage, this would definitely have earned her a brutal beating. Yet the Duke before her coldly ordered her to stand up. Mint thought she was about to receive an even harsher scolding. Unexpectedly, the expressionless man told her that in the future, she should not grovel just because she had dirted a carpet. That was not the way of his Ecdonia family. The girl hugged herself in fear. In truth, ever since the Duke adopted her, she had felt that Urius had mistaken her for someone else. In the orphanage, where she had suffered endless exclusion, she simply did not deserve happiness. Seeing the Duke frown in displeasure, was she going to be sent back to that hellish orphanage again? The Duke who had just adopted the girl was actually forcing her to take off her clothes. Little Mint trembled in fear. Most nobles adopted orphans only as playthings. The girl had already prepared herself to accept her fate. With the maid's help, She tremblingly untied her robe. Her back was covered in scars, with barely a patch of unbroken skin to be found. Even battle-hardened Urius was shocked by the sight. Yet the touch the girl had anticipated never came. Puzzled, Little Mint turned her head back and heard the Duke ask coldly, "Who exactly did this to you?" The girl could not help recalling the endless beatings and scoldings in the orphanage. The overwhelming fear left her unable to say a single word. Seeing Little Mint's fragile state, Urius could not bear to keep pressing her. He told the girl to rest early, then turned and left. The wide bed was like a soft cloud. It was the most peaceful sleep Mint had had in a long time. The maid gently helped her wash up and dress. She even praised her unusual hair color as being like an emerald gem. The girl felt a little shy after receiving the compliment, but when Mint looked in the mirror, she was stunned by the unfamiliar self reflected there. After being carefully groomed, she looked like a princess out of a fairy tale. Every step she took carried a faint fragrance. A life this happy was something Little Mint would never have dared dream of. She was led by the attendants to the luxurious dining hall. The aroma of food teased the girl's taste buds, but when the gilded doors were fully opened, the familiar face inside made her tremble all over in fear. Why was the orphanage headmaster here too? The memories of her past abuse came flooding back once again. Mint stood frozen in place. Only when Urius called her to his side did the girl dazedly move over. Her awful complexion made the Duke worry, but now is not the time to comfort Mint. He was going to force the headmaster to confess the evidence of harming the girl and make the scum pay the price. The hypocritical headmaster clearly did not know the Duke's purpose. However, he had always resented Mint becoming the adopted daughter of the Grand Duke. If the girl really gained a noble status, she might come back for revenge. Thinking of this, the man had already brewed up a vicious plan in his heart. He wanted this obedient girl to be driven back to the orphanage. The abused girl had only just managed to touch happiness. Yet the despicable headmaster was plotting to drag her back to the orphanage. The man obsequiously told the Duke that although Mint looked thin and weak, she was actually not that young anymore. As far as he knew, most nobles preferred younger children. Sure enough, the Duke, who had remained indifferent the whole time, reacted when he heard the topic of age. The headmaster thought his scheme was working, so he grew even more brazen in making up bad things about the girl. He had no idea that Urius's expression was growing darker and darker, but Mint was terrified inside. She thought the Duke, who cared about age, would send her back to that nightmarish hell. She would have to eat those rotten leftovers again, put those ragged, foul-smelling old clothes back on. She might even be sold as a commodity to accompany drinkers. Controlled by fear, the girl mechanically stuffed food into her mouth, her trembling hands unable even to hold the knife and fork steady. Urius noticed that something was wrong with the girl. He gently told Mint to return to her room first, saying softly that he had a few things to discuss alone with the headmaster. The obedient Mint could only leave with the maid. Once the girl had gone far enough, Urius dropped his elegant and composed facade. In a cold voice, he demanded to know exactly how the bruises on Mint's body had appeared. The headmaster was stunned by the question, but still immediately fabricated a seemingly reasonable explanation. He told Urius that the girl had been injured because she got into fights with others. Not only that, she was also a child with a withdrawn personality. The headmaster waited eagerly for the Duke to cancel the adoption, but he did not expect Urius to narrow his eyes dangerously. "Don't you know who I am?" The headmaster quickly shook his head ingratiatingly. As one of the only 5 spirit masters in the world, Urius's name was known by every household. Yet he did not notice that the man's eyes were already full of murderous intent. He angrily demanded of the headmaster, "Then why would you think I couldn't even tell what kind of scars those were?" The headmaster trembled in fright. He loudly defended himself, hoping to muddle through. But Urius had already raised a hand, signaling for a servant to bring over a tray. On it lay a pair of blood-stained glasses. The headmaster completely panicked at the sight. Then the man elegantly snapped his fingers. Groups of guards rushed in, surrounding the sleazy fat man from all sides. Urius coldly ordered the headmaster's arrest, but all he could think about was the image of the girl trembling in fear. He should go comfort his little princess. At that thought, the man's expression gradually softened. He still did not know that, in the days to come, he would slowly unlock his little sister-obsessed side. Even a brother with no blood relation could become a doting siscon. After getting rid of the greedy headmaster, Urius began to worry about Little Mint's health. The sight of that child trembling so helplessly was truly heartbreaking. To put her at ease, the man decided to sign the girl's adoption agreement as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Mint, who had returned to her room alone, was crying helplessly. She knew perfectly well that everything the headmaster had said was a lie, but under the control of fear. She did not even have the courage to refute him. Just then, a rapid knock at the door interrupted the girl's thoughts. Just as she had expected, it was a summons from the Duke. Although Little Mint had already prepared herself to be sent back to the orphanage, when she thought back on the brief happiness of the past 2 days, her heart still could not help but ache. She still remembered that cup of warm cocoa. Sadly, she would never get to drink it again in the days to come. Before she knew it, the girl had already been brought before Urius. Worried that little Mint had not eaten enough, the Duke had even specially prepared a table full of delicious food for her. Yet the girl's attention was completely fixed on the document in the man's hand. Mint mistakenly thought it was a contract to dissolve the adoption. A sense of grievance instantly filled her chest. She did not want to let go of this happiness that was right before her. At that very moment, Little Mint summoned up all her courage. She told the Duke that she was not the bad child the headmaster had described. She had never fought anyone, and she had once had friends too, but they were all later adopted away. The girl's voice grew softer and softer, and with her head lowered, she seemed to be waiting for the final judgment. Urius knew that his little princess had misunderstood, so he gently told Mint that this was actually the adoption agreement. This sudden reversal was almost too much to process. The girl stood there in disbelief, and the Duke had already gently gone down on one knee. His broad hand lightly rested on the girl's soft hair. From this day forward, they would become each other's family. There was only one final step left in the adoption process. The butler brought over an ink pad and motioned for Little Mint to press her handprint on it. The girl's heart was full of anticipation. She almost used all the strength in her body to press her little hand onto the end of the agreement. Even after a long while, Mint's uncontrollable little heart was still pounding, as if she were dreaming. She was no longer that orphan who could be bullied by anyone. So this was how happy it felt to have a family that loved and cherished you. Yet through her own efforts, she became everyone's darling. It had already been more than 2 months since Little Mint was adopted. During this time, she displayed astonishing talent for learning. Even the usually stern teacher Trena could not stop praising the girl's outstanding performance. However, she worried that Little Mint might feel lonely studying alone. Out of an elder's concern, she suggested that the girl could study together with noble young ladies of her own age. This made Little Mint begin to look forward to it. Perhaps she could make a few new friends while studying. But the well-behaved girl still told her teacher that she had to discuss it with the Duke first before making a decision. Unexpectedly, just as the girl finished speaking, the door to the study was pushed open, and the person who entered was precisely the brother she missed every day. The girl's eyes filled with delight. She eagerly moved to Urius's side. She repeated teacher Trena's suggestion to her brother once again. Seeing the expectant look in his little sister's eyes, the man's gaze was full of doting affection. After not seeing her for a few days, his little princess seemed to have grown a little taller again. He told Mint that for such a small matter, she could decide for herself. After saying that, he turned to leave. But at that moment, the girl behind him pitifully tugged at the corner of his clothes. Her upturned little face was full of hope. She softly asked her brother if he could stay and have dinner with her. Little Mint knew that it was already wonderful enough that her busy brother had come to visit her, but she still could not help hoping that the Duke could stay with her a little longer. The girl was not at all surprised to receive her brother's refusal. She lowered her head in disappointment. Urius likewise noticed his sister's dejection, but now was exactly the time when the war situation was tense. So, he could only keep the girl's request in mind for now. Unable to invite her brother, Mint remained downcast all day. Fortunately, the maid comforted her by her side. Only a delicious dinner barely managed to cheer her up again. All she could do now was study hard and avoid causing trouble for her brother. Just then, the butler walked in carrying a bottle of strangely colored medicine. The girl's tiny face instantly scrunched up. She knew this was her brother's concern for her. So, even though the medicine was shockingly bitter, she still obediently forced herself to drink it. Little Mint's polite and sensible manner also gradually won everyone's affection without her noticing. After finishing the medicine, the girl returned to her desk to continue studying. However, the butler announced that a guest who had come specifically to see her had arrived. The girl had already begun imagining her first meeting with a new friend. She had no idea at all that she was about to be put in a difficult position. The girl still did not know that the arrogant, noble young lady before her had actually come specifically to laugh at her. Little Mint gracefully lifted her skirt. Her standard greeting was even more proper than what was written in the textbooks. This made Asila narrow her eyes in displeasure. She had only come to see this lowly adopted daughter make a fool of herself. She had not expected the girl's dignified manner to be in no way inferior to those young ladies from noble families. Asila could not help but give rise to a vicious thought. She showed the girl a friendly smile, yet she deliberately steered the conversation toward Little Mint's humble origins. Seeing the girl's troubled expression gave her immense satisfaction. Sensitive Little Mint vaguely sensed the girl's hostility, but in order not to make things even more awkward, she could only deliberately change the subject. She asked about the boy beside Asila. Who exactly was he? This dull boy had been following the girl silently ever since entering, without saying a word. That made Little Mint somewhat curious. Having finally found a chance to humiliate Mint, how could Asila possibly let it go so easily? She turned to glance at her attendant. In an offhand tone, she said that the boy had been brought back from the black market. Because of those special red eyes, he had once been fiercely fought over. Mint was alarmed by the way she treated a person like an object. Then she realized the girl's gaze had already shifted toward her. Your eye color is quite special too. If you were put on the black market, I suppose you could fetch a good price as well. Asila's undisguised mockery completely infuriated Mint. The girl felt as though all the blood in her body were rushing backward. Perhaps at this moment, she should be angry because what Asila had insulted was not only her, but also her family, and also her brother. What Mint most wanted to do at that moment was splash the tea in her hand directly onto Asila's arrogant face. Yet in the end, the girl held back. Anger was not the best way to solve a problem. The fact that she came from an orphanage had never been a secret anyway. All the girl could do was strive to become a qualified and outstanding young duchess, and not cause her brother any trouble. Thinking this, Little Mint studied her graceful composure and said with a smile that they could talk about those topics after getting to know each other better. However, Little Mint did not expect that her tolerance would only make Asila push her luck even further. The girl never imagined that the first gift she would receive after being adopted would actually be a clean-cut, refreshing young boy. The more Little Mint gracefully and properly gave way, the more Asila pushed her luck. She pretended to be friendly and gestured for her attendant to stand beside the girl. She even generously said that she could lend the boy to Mint for a week. After all, judging by their temperaments, they did indeed seem very well matched. Little Mint was completely enraged by this rude mockery. Her expression darkened slightly, and she stood up, wanting to slap her. But she did not know that the despicable Asila had been waiting all along for the girl to lose her composure. A loud bang as the door was pushed open instantly broke the awkward atmosphere in the room. Little Mint did not expect that the one who would help her out of the situation was the usually unsmiling butler. The man tactfully ordered the red-haired girl to leave, and the sensible Asila had no choice but to follow the butler out. Listening as the girl's footsteps gradually faded away, Little Mint finally loosened her tightly clenched hand. Her delicate palm was filled with deep fingernail marks. She let out a self-reproachful sigh. If Mr. Roll had not appeared in time, she would probably have disgraced her brother and family just now. The girl obediently began to reflect on herself, but then she suddenly remembered that the red-eyed boy had still been left aside by her. Little Mint could not help but ask him whether he wanted to sit down and have something to eat. Unexpectedly, the expressionless boy flatly refused. With a serious face, he said that eating cake was something only children did. However, his height, which was about the same as Mint's, made those words completely unconvincing. The girl could not help but let out a soft laugh. The joy of chatting with someone her own age made her eager to become friends with the boy. Little Mint gently asked the boy's name. Seeing that he did not speak for a long time, the girl simply went on talking to herself. My eyes are mint-colored, and my name is Mint too. Your eyes are red, so how about calling you? Before the girl could finish, the boy interrupted first, saying that his name was Urion, and as her servant, he was not worthy of letting his master know his name. But the girl's innocent appearance made him unable to bear rejecting her. He could tell that Little Mint was different from the other noble young ladies. The boy still did not know that this petite and adorable figure was quietly entering his heart. Childhood friendship could actually be this sweet. Little Mint was admiring flowers in the courtyard with her new friend. Brilliant sunlight fell on the girl as she gently opened her lunchbox. She enthusiastically asked the boy beside her whether he wanted to try some, but Urion expressionlessly refused her. This made Little Mint feel slightly disappointed, but with her delicate sensitivity, she also understood. The boy was deliberately keeping his distance from her because he was mindful of their difference in status. The girl said with some difficulty that Urion's portion had been specially prepared by her, and in the end, this boy who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside could not bear to refuse. Little Mint was happily enjoying dessert with Urion when, just then, a gentle breeze blew by and a beautiful petal landed right on target. It happened to fall right in front of the girl. Its smooth curve looked as though it had gently fallen out of a painting. Little Mint's eyes instantly filled with delight. She carefully held the petal up before Urion. However, the unromantic boy threw this one-of-a-kind gesture straight into the trash can. Seeing the gift she had given being thrown away, the girl could not help feeling a little wronged. She said softly that it was a gift for Urion. Mint's words gently touched the softest part of the boy's heart. He quickly turned around and went back to the trash can to search carefully. Sweat slid down the boy's cheeks, but he refused to give up in the slightest. At last, Urion found that petal with its special meaning. He carefully wrapped it in a handkerchief and sincerely told Mint he would definitely treasure this gift well. Looking at the dirty boy in front of her, the girl felt both moved and heartbroken. If not for the restraints of status, they would certainly have become very good friends. However, their master-servant relationship kept the boy unwilling to truly open his heart, and in order not to let Urion bear too heavy a psychological burden, Little Mint decided to first find some common topics with the boy. The girl curiously asked about his former life, but the moment the words left her mouth, Little Mint regretted it. With Asila's mean-spirited nature, there was no way Urion could have lived an easy life. The boy sighed helplessly and said that sooner or later, one day, he would be taken away in the night. The innocent girl thought the boy would be taken away to be abused. She heartbrokenly held the boy's arm in her hands. However, this intimate scene was just seen by the Duke, who had come to visit Little Mint. The Duke, who had always doted on his younger sister, actually became jealous. Urius had just arrived at the courtyard when he saw Little Mint affectionately linking arms with another boy. His little princess, whom he cherished above all else, was actually being so nice to another male. This made the man narrow his eyes unhappily. He quickly walked to the two of them. When Little Mint saw that the newcomer was her brother, she immediately revealed a sweet smile. She excitedly introduced her new friend to her brother, but the Duke interrupted her at an inopportune moment. The girl immediately realized that she should not tell her busy brother about such trivial matters. Just as she was about to change the subject, Urion spoke first. He asked whether the girl had eaten. Little Mint was stunned by the question, yet in her mind flashed the scene of being rejected after inviting her brother last time. Being considerate, she did not want to make things difficult for her brother, so she deliberately affectionately took Urion's arm. In an obedient tone, she said that she was just about to have lunch with the boy. The girl did not expect that her brother's expression would not soften, but instead become even gloomier. She also did not know what she had said wrong, so she softly added another sentence. She could take good care of herself and asked her brother not to worry about her. Looking at his polite yet distant younger sister, Urion could not help feeling somewhat disappointed. He had specially carved time out of his busy work just to fulfill his sister's wish. But now, there was already someone else willing to stay by the girl's side. Thinking of this, the Duke gave this black-haired, red-eyed boy a deep, searching look. And Urion also sensed the Duke's scrutiny. He solemnly stepped forward. He humbly gave a bow and said that he would do everything in his power to serve his master. The boy's steady manner earned the Duke's approval. Although Urion's jealousy had not yet faded, he still hoped even more that his little princess could live happily. Thinking this, the man turned around forlornly. Before leaving, he told Mint that they would eat together when there was another chance. Only then did the slow-to-notice girl realize that her brother had specially come to invite her to lunch, and Little Mint could not help regretting it. But then, thinking of the affection her brother unintentionally revealed, a trace of sweetness rose in the girl's heart, and she still did not know that her happy days were about to end very soon. Before long, she would be sent to the guillotine, the girl who had suffered torment in the orphanage. Yet the scheming fake friend she had only just made personally pushed her into a horrifying abyss. In the blink of an eye, a week had already passed. At last, it was time to return Urion. The girl accepted the invitation and boarded the carriage to Asila's home. The red-haired girl was, as always, sarcastically mocking Little Mint. Yet the calm-faced girl maintained her elegant demeanor throughout. Before leaving, the butler had once reminded her that if she did not want to associate with these rude, noble young ladies, she could simply refuse. The ducal mansion would forever be her strongest backing. However, the sensible Little Mint calmly said that it was fine. She did not want to become that withdrawn child the headmistress had spoken of. In her heart, the girl silently encouraged herself. These were all trials she had to go through on the road to becoming a little lady. She believed that one day, she would become her brother's pride. Asila also did not expect that the humiliation she had painstakingly prepared would be completely ineffective. Instead, the girl's calm and composed manner made Asila look like an ignorant clown, especially when she saw Little Mint and Urion chatting and laughing together. Such a warm scene deeply stabbed at her arrogant self-esteem. In order to save face, Asila proposed taking everyone to the Empire's destitute slum district, a place full of beggars. Once they got there, she would be able to humiliate Little Mint properly again. Return to the residence, the girl asked impatiently. She ordered the coachman to turn around. She was completely unaware of how dangerous such an action was. Seeing this, Little Mint could only sigh helplessly. She could already imagine Asila's smug tone when mocking her later. In truth, verbal attacks like these no longer made her sad, but this exhausting socializing still made the girl feel incomparably weary. If the other noble young ladies were all like Asila, she would definitely collapse. Thinking of this, the girl's gaze turned to Urion at her side, and the boy was also staring at her with burning eyes. She really did want to be friends with Urion more. At some point, the urgent sound of hoofbeats gradually slowed down. Little Mint curiously looked out the window, but after only one glance, the girl recoiled in fright again and again. Armed thugs had completely surrounded their carriage, and in each pair of eyes full of desire. It was as if they wanted to devour the girls alive. The pretty girls were surrounded in the middle by a group of ragged beggars. Little Mint had also not expected that she would be brought to such a place filled with malice. Even through the glass, she could still feel the danger drawing near. Yet Asila beside her calmly said that there were guard knights present, so she need not worry. Sure enough, just as the girl had said, the thugs were quickly beaten to their knees, begging for mercy. Just as Mint let out a sigh of relief, the carriage suddenly began to shake violently, as though out of control. It turned out that a thug hiding in the corner had cut the reins of the horses pulling the carriage. The frightened horses let out shrill neighs. Like mad, they charged toward the cliff, and at this critical moment, Urion disregarded his own safety and carefully protected the fragile girl in his arms, using his own body as a shield to protect the girl. The boy's embrace was warm and steadfast, and in an instant it dispelled all the girl's fear. However, an even greater crisis still awaited them ahead. After learning that his sister was in danger, the Duke rushed to the scene of the accident at once, but he was still one step too late in the end. The shattered carriage testified to how tragic the accident had been. Fortunately, no bloodstains were found inside the carriage. This meant that Mint had most likely been abducted by villains midway. Urias's eyes surged with nearly uncontrollable killing intent, and he swore that he would make those who had hurt his sister pay the price. Meanwhile, the kidnapped little Mint had already been taken to a dilapidated warehouse. Several other children from noble families were also locked inside the room. Fortunately, Yurion had stayed by her side from the moment the incident began. Only then did the girl feel a measure of reassurance, and little Mint barely forced herself upright. She calmly looked around, but did not see any sign of Asila. Although that willful noble young lady was hateful, the kind-hearted girl still could not help asking where she had gone. Yet at that moment, a wretched-looking man kicked open the tightly shut door. Urion hurriedly stood in front of the girl, but unexpectedly, this man used only one kick to send the frail boy sprawling to the ground. Looking at the boy's miserable state, he burst into uncontrollable laughter, then grabbed Little Mint by the wrist and said, "I heard you're the adopted daughter of the Agdonia family." A strong sense of unease instantly surged in the girl's heart, and when she connected it with the flag on the wall bearing a special emblem, she realized that the man before her was her brother's sworn enemy, and because of this, she would very likely lose her life. She had only just finally gained a brother who loved her, yet the girl was about to be sent to the guillotine. Bound, Little Mint accidentally exposed the identity of being the Duke's adopted daughter. Her brother was the kidnapper's enemy, and because of that she was forcibly escorted to the black market venue. The strong smell of blood made the girl on the stage tremble all over, yet the thugs below the stage were cheering wildly. The surging malice was almost enough to drown the girl completely. Everyone wanted to bid on her, and then torture her to death in the most horrifying way. The curses and jeers rose wave after wave. Yet Little Mint, who was about to face death, was unexpectedly calm. She remembered what her brother had once said to her. "You are a noble little princess. You must not kneel and beg for mercy in a humble manner." The girl's calmness instead enraged this group of fanatical believers. They shouted that she should be offered to the gods on the spot. Poor Little Mint was roughly dragged onto the execution ground. A sharp guillotine blade hung high above her head. The girl trembled slightly beyond her control, but she was not so frightened that she cried and made a fuss. Instead, in a small voice, she asked the executioner whether she could be allowed to say her final words. A tide of mocking laughter instantly erupted from below the stage. They were all waiting for the girl to cry bitterly and kneel to beg for mercy. Yet no one had expected that this tiny child would erupt with astonishing courage at this moment. She glared angrily at the people below the stage and, with all her strength, cursed them as fools who only knew how to vent their anger on children. After speaking, the girl calmly lowered her head, and in her daze, she seemed to hear her brother praising her for doing well. She had done it. She had not disgraced her brother's name. Yet the pain she had imagined did not come. Like a beam of light, the tall man blocked all darkness for the girl. Urias raised his sword and brought it down. The thug who had been shouting just moments ago became a cold corpse in the blink of an eye. When the girl saw that the person who had come was the brother she had been longing for, the heart she had been holding up finally settled. She looked worriedly at the Duke's back. This man, covered in killing intent, only softened his gaze when he looked at her. Urias softly told Little Mint to close her eyes. He did not want his little princess to see such a bloody scene. After saying that, the man's gaze turned sharp once more. Anyone who dared bully his sister deserved to die. When a sister-obsessed brother discovers that his little princess has been bullied, how serious are the consequences? Urias's eyes were full of killing intent. It was precisely this group of people who had tried to harm his precious little sister. The man furiously hacked at those thugs who were scattering and fleeing. The cramped venue was transformed into a living hell in an instant. Yet in the face of such a cruel scene, Little Mint could not bear to close her eyes. Her brother's heroic figure was like a knight protecting a princess. His handsome appearance made it impossible for her to look away. However, at some point, one escaped thug had already quietly crept to the girl's side. Before Little Mint could react, he yanked her in front of him. A sharp dagger pressed against the side of the girl's neck as the man shouted harshly, ordering the Duke, who was fighting bloodily, to stop at once. Urias immediately turned around, his icy eyes filled with killing intent. But he did not stop. Instead, he walked straight toward his younger sister. The thug had long since lost the arrogance he had shown just now, yet the man had no intention of letting him go. He gently reminded his sister that this time she must close her eyes, and Little Mint obediently nodded. Right after that, she heard the sound of a sharp sword cutting through the air beside her. The man's screams rang out one after another. The girl covered her ears in fear. A pair of strong arms gently lifted her up. When she opened her eyes again, Little Mint was already securely held in her brother's arms. Being carried in such a gentle princess carry for the first time, the girl struggled in fluster for a moment. The man immediately told her to hold tightly onto his shoulders. Her brother's heartbeat was warm and strong. Even though he was surrounded by a murderous aura, it still could not hide the doting tenderness in his eyes. Urias chuckled softly and teased the girl in his arms, saying that it turned out his little sister would call others idiots when she was angry too. Little Mint lowered her head in embarrassment. However, Her gaze was drawn to the crisscrossing corpses on the ground. That horrifying scene felt strangely familiar, and the girl only felt her stomach churn. Her consciousness also began to grow hazy. Her brother's gentle voice of comfort was like a lullaby in the night. Little Mint fell into a deep sleep in the Duke's warm embrace. However, the girl developed a high fever that very night after returning to the ducal mansion. The prolonged illness made her unable to tell dream from reality. Many people were worrying about her, and the girl wanted to respond, but she felt as if her body were filled with lead and could not move, so she could only struggle within the dream. Yet when Little Mint opened her eyes again, she discovered that she had returned once more to that place that terrified her. The injured girl's high fever would not subside, so her sister-obsessed brother could only stay by her side all night. And at this moment, Little Mint was being tightly entangled by a terrifying nightmare. The inner demon born from it infinitely magnified the girl's inferiority. A child with the same face as hers revealed a sweet smile, yet the words coming from its mouth were the cruelest of all. Every sentence seemed to be spoken directly to Little Mint. Someone of your status does not deserve happiness. The girl suddenly woke from the dream, the overly real scenes within it, making her feel a near suffocating palpitation. Her frail body trembled slightly. Just then, a warm, large hand gently covered the back of her hand. The warmth coming from his palm effectively soothed the girl's sensitive heart. Little Mint raised her head slightly and met her brother's worried gaze. The man gently lifted his hand and felt the temperature on her forehead. Hearing her brother tell her to sleep a little longer, the girl obediently curled back up on the bed. However, the motion of lying down accidentally pulled at the wounds on her body. The sudden sting made tears gather at the corners of Mint's eyes. Seeing his sister's pitiful appearance, a trace of heartache welled up in Urius's heart. Yet at this moment, he recalled the way the girl had looked when she had despaired and gone to die. If he had arrived a few seconds later, he might have lost his little princess forever. The man's tone unconsciously turned stern. He seriously asked his sister why she had not believed that he would come save her. Little Mint was stunned by the question, and the terrifying inner demon from the dream appeared again. It negatively persuaded her that she was unworthy of this noble happiness. The girl covered her ears in pain. Stop talking. Yet as long as she thought of her lowly status, she would feel that she did not deserve her brother's affection. Faced with his sister's silence, the considerate Urius chose not to press further. Instead, he gently told Mint that it was his fault for failing to earn her trust. After saying that, he gently replaced the towel on the girl's forehead. Little Mint thought she had made her brother unhappy again. She lowered her head aggrievedly, but then heard her brother solemnly promise her that no matter where she encountered danger, he would rush to save her at the very first moment. After Urius said that, he prepared to stand up. He told his sister to sleep a little longer, but then saw a small pale hand pitifully tugging at the corner of his clothes. Who would have thought that the strongest god of war in the empire was actually a gentle, sister-doting maniac? Urius only showed his softer side when facing Little Mint. Just like now, his sister was pitifully tugging at the corner of his clothes. In a soft voice, she begged him to stay and lull her to sleep. The girl's adorable appearance made it impossible for anyone to refuse. The Duke was only stunned for a second before elegantly sitting back down. However, he gently said that his singing was terrible, so he could not sing his sister a sweet lullaby. Originally, Little Mint had been feeling extremely upset with herself for making such an unreasonable request. She had not expected her brother to agree so readily. The girl quickly obediently shrank back under the covers, her bright eyes opened wide and round. Seeing this, the Duke could not help teasing. "You don't look like you plan to sleep at all." Only then did Little Mint realize that her brother was looking at her with a face full of smiles. She could only obediently close her eyes, and the man's voice was like a gentle cello. His concerned words carried a hypnotic magic, little by little healing the girl's sensitive heart. At first, Little Mint could still answer some of the questions in a daze. Slowly, she felt her body becoming lighter and lighter, as if she were floating on soft clouds. A broad hand gently stroked the top of her head, and such deep affection made the girl feel inexplicably at ease. The owl outside the window let out frightening screeches in the night. Yet Little Mint did not feel the slightest fear, because she knew that her brother would always stay by her side and protect her. When she woke up after sleeping, the girl's illness was mostly better as well. She decided to visit Urion, who had risked his life to protect her. And even before this, she had already known that the boy was badly injured. However, when she saw the boy covered all over in bandages with her own eyes, she felt even worse inside. With tears in her eyes, the girl apologized to Urion again and again. However, the seriously injured boy did not care and said that he was fine. He only hated that he could not grow up faster so that he could protect Little Mint better. The girl was so moved that her eyes grew misty. But when she thought of how her good friend would have to return to the Asila household as a servant after recovering, Little Mint decided to ask her brother. To keep Urion by her side. His most beloved little sister actually wanted to live together with another man. Urias's uncontrollable jealousy surged, and seeing her brother's expression gradually darken. Only then did Little Mint realize that her wording might have made her brother misunderstand. She immediately explained in panic that she merely hoped Urion could stay in the ducal mansion and continue living there. However, the girl did not expect that her brother would only reply lightly that he understood. Then he handed her a plate of sweet-smelling chocolate. Little Mint obediently chewed in small bites. Yet then she heard her brother casually ask whether she had fallen for that black-haired, red-eyed slave boy. The blunt question almost made the girl choke. She did not understand why the Duke would ask her that, but the person she liked was obviously her brother. Thinking of this, Mint's palm-sized little face flushed bright red. She hurriedly clarified to the Duke the pure nature of her relationship with Urion. That gentle black-haired boy was, to her, a close friend and also a benefactor. The girl could not bear for him to go back to the Asila household and suffer again, but that was only out of the precious friendship between friends. Hearing this, the Duke's gaze gradually softened. Actually, even if Little Mint had truly fallen for Urion, he would not have had the heart to refuse any of his sister's requests. But Urias hoped even more that his sister could confidently say what she wanted. He patiently guided this timid girl, trying to help her regain the courage she had when she had first arrived at the ducal mansion. Little Mint lowered her head somewhat awkwardly, but when she thought that her friend might suffer misfortune because of her cowardice, the girl's eyes became firm again. Trembling, she clenched her hands tightly, and her voice carried unwavering determination. She hoped Urion would not be sent away. She also wanted to become friends with the boy. Little Mint's eyes were full of hope, but the Duke was instead amused by his sister's solemn reaction. In a gentle teasing tone, he said to the girl before him that if others saw her like this, they would think he was about to eat her. The shy Little Mint wished she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into, while Urias beside her looked at her with deepened eyes. Sure enough, his sister still could not fully trust him, but the days they would spend together were still long. Perhaps before long, he would receive a meal invitation from his little princess. Thinking of this, a trace of barely noticeable doting appeared in the man's eyes. The butler actually appeared in the front hall with Urion, who was covered in serious injuries. Just how far could her brother go in doting on his little sister? Little Mint had not expected that the Duke would not only take Urion in, but also allow the boy to join the Empire's highest-level immortal knights. One should know that with his status as a slave, it was absolutely impossible for him to become a noble knight. The girl happily shared this hard-won joy with her friend. She looked at her brother gratefully. Urias returned his sister an equally doting look. As long as his little princess was happy, that was enough. The man then turned to look at the black-haired boy beside them. He did not mind Little Mint having one more close friend, but if the boy's purpose in approaching his sister was something else, then he should not blame him for being impolite. In the days that followed, Little Mint was kept in the mansion to recover peacefully from her illness. Meanwhile, the Duke went to deal with the remaining aftermath. Urias executed almost all of the masterminds behind the kidnapping. The small number of scattered remnants were also wiped out by the members of the Night Order. The man vented all his anger over his sister's injuries on these captured prisoners. The cruel interrogation showed no mercy, and it was also from the criminals' mouths that the man learned this seemingly accidental kidnapping had all been specifically designed against Little Mint. Miss Asila, who had brought his sister to the slums, had been especially instrumental. Thus, the next day, the Duke invited Asila's father to the mansion for a visit. As soon as the Marquis arrived at the ducal mansion, Urias invited him to the study. With a grave expression, the man demanded that he replace all the servants in his household. There was not the slightest room for negotiation in his stern tone. The Duke had two reasons for doing this. On one hand, it was to satisfy his sister's request to keep Urion. On the other hand, it was to indirectly punish the Marquis for failing to properly discipline his daughter. Following the Marquis was his spoiled and overbearing daughter, Asila. The kidnapping incident had not taught this little girl to behave. Holding flowers, the girl carried herself in an arrogant manner. Her verbal apology was completely insincere, and her eyes were filled with an air of unbridled haughtiness. The butler at the side could not help worrying about Little Mint's situation. After all, in the previous confrontations, it had always been his young mistress who suffered grievances. He had thought that this soft-natured girl would be at a loss because of Asila's arrogance. Unexpectedly, this time Little Mint was calm, composed, serene, and elegant enough. In terms of presence alone, she was already no less than anyone else. The butler could not help revealing a gratified smile. This was how a little noble lady ought to be. The girl who had suffered abuse, however, had nearly lost her life because of the jealousy of her scheming fake friend. Before this, Little Mint had always endured Asila's provocations whenever she could. However, what such unprincipled retreat brought in return was even more outrageous encroachment. From the moment she entered, Asila put on an overbearing posture. In an arrogant tone, she bluntly stated that it was the mole in the Marquis' household who had caused their kidnapping. She was completely unaware of the dangers of the slums, so why should she apologize? After saying that, She even aggrievedly showed the small scrape on her arm. Asila's casual attitude instantly darkened Little Mint's expression. If her brother had not appeared in time, she would probably already have been abused to death by those cruel criminals. The girl refused to accept these excuses for shirking responsibility. However, the spoiled and willful Asila suddenly flew into a rage at this moment. She slammed the table and stood up without caring about appearances. She loudly questioned Little Mint, asking if she wanted to steal her attendant. After saying that, she angrily emphasized again that Urion belonged to her and she would never let the matter go. Hearing this, Little Mint only felt her blood surge. He was her best friend, yet in Asila's eyes, he had become a worthless private possession. The moment she thought that after returning to the Marquis' household, the boy would still suffer those unequal treatments, Little Mint decided she would no longer swallow her anger. She calmly stated that Urion's face had already been seen by the criminals, so only by staying in the ducal mansion could his safety truly be protected. The girl's eyes were gentle yet firm, making her seem like a completely different person from the timid child she had been before. It was the first time Asila had been stunned by Little Mint's powerful presence, yet after coming back to her senses, she grew even more furious from humiliation. Unwilling to accept it, the girl cursed Little Mint for being deeply scheming. However, the elegant little noble lady no longer wished to keep tangling with the disgraceful Asila. The girl revealed a distant smile and calmly said that if that was the only way Asila would give up, then she was free to go and protest. Looking at Asila gritting her teeth, Little Mint only felt especially relieved at this moment after coming to the Grand Duke's household. However, the girl still did not know that even greater danger was waiting for her. The Marquis' daughter, who had always bullied the girl, had finally received the punishment she deserved. Little Mint had not expected that proud and arrogant Asila would also have a day when she spoke humbly and lowered herself. Now she wrote several love letters to Urion every single day, yet the boy by her side remained extremely cold toward the overtures of his former master. Even so, the Marquis' daughter still delivered letters every day without fail. Her love letters had also become the laughingstock of the entire ducal mansion, but Little Mint could probably understand Asila's feelings. The boy's outstanding appearance and gentle personality were like a knight from a fairy tale. If anyone was to blame, it could only be that the former Asila had not known how to cherish him properly. At this moment, Urion was thoughtfully helping Little Mint check for mistakes in her letter. During this period, they had been keeping up a correspondence. The gentle boy carefully replied to the girl's letters every day, and it was also with Urion's help that Little Mint's reading and writing skills were able to improve by leaps and bounds in such a short time. After finishing the check, the boy gently praised the girl for making rapid progress. However, the butler suddenly came to visit at this moment. He told the girl that the Duke wanted to see her. Little Mint immediately agreed to her brother's invitation with delight. Watching the girl's departing figure, a trace of disappointment welled up in Urion's heart. However, thinking of the huge difference in status between them, the boy ultimately decided to bury this humble love deep in his heart. On the other side, Little Mint had already arrived at the door of her brother's office. The moment the girl entered, she saw letters piled on the desk like a mountain. When Urius saw that the visitor was his younger sister, he immediately stopped the work in his hands. In a gentle tone, he invited the girl to have lunch with him. Little Mint could hear the weariness in her brother's voice. She obediently asked whether, now that she had learned to read and write, she could help share some of his work. Urius was surprised by how thoughtful his sister was. In order not to disappoint the girl, he handed the task of sorting the letters to Little Mint. The man gently lifted his sister onto the chair. The girl instantly became full of fighting spirit, so she carefully went through each letter. But as she read on, she discovered that most of them were actually dull love letters. So it turned out that her brother was this popular with girls. Little Mint felt both proud and a little disappointed. She did not know when she herself would become as outstanding as her brother. However, reading love letters was simply too boring, and the sleepy girl only felt her eyelids growing heavier and heavier. Before long, she drifted off to sleep. She still did not know that the man beside her was gazing at her with eyes full of affection. What should she do if she accidentally fell asleep in her brother's arms? Little Mint opened her drowsy eyes and saw that the man beside her was still intently reviewing the documents in his hands. The girl quickly sat up straight in nervousness, put on a serious little face, and pretended that nothing had happened. However, Little Mint did not know that her brother beside her had already taken in everything that had just happened. With gentle indulgence in his eyes, he smiled and teased his little princess. "You slept so soundly just now that you even started snoring." The girl's face instantly flushed with embarrassment at her brother's words, and she stammered out one explanation after another. Her adorable reaction made Urius unable to hold back a soft laugh. Smiling, he told his sister that he was only joking, but that she really had been sleeping very deeply. At that point, a worried look could not help appearing on the man's face. It was not the first time he had noticed that his little sister often stayed up late at night reading and studying. Although Urius looked forward to his little princess's growth, what was the point of it? More than that, he hoped his sister could have a healthy body. To keep her brother from worrying, Little Mint obediently said that from now on she would study during the day. Being the sensible girl she was, she continued sorting the remaining letters. Most of the love letters, the girl could understand very quickly. That was also thanks to the wonderful romance novel she had read last night. Having only just begun to understand love, she still did not understand the complicated feelings between men and women, and could only simply classify them as a longing for family, just like how she liked her brother now. Little Mint could not help but start daydreaming. Would someone as outstanding as her brother think about having several children in the future? Urius was momentarily stunned by the question. However, the butler's ill-timed cough interrupted this imagination-provoking conversation. In a teasing tone, he joked with Urius, saying that he had not expected his lordship to actually be planning to have children. The Duke, being teased by his close friend, hurriedly denied it, but the butler directly ignored his answer. The man elegantly handed Mint some carefully prepared refreshments. "Thank you." The girl immediately showed a delighted smile on her face. She patted the thick stack of letters in front of her and seriously told the butler that it was because she had seen these love letters written to her brother that she had started thinking about having children. At this moment, Little Mint did not notice that her brother behind her had already revealed a jealous expression. The girl who loved only her brother was actually going to be taken into the Emperor's harem. Listening to the maid's report, Urius instantly revealed a dark expression. Without having time to explain to his sister, the man gently lifted his little princess down from the chair. With a grave expression, he instructed the butler to take the young lady back to her room as quickly as possible. Seeing her brother's serious expression, the obedient girl immediately followed behind the butler. However, Little Mint simply could not suppress the worry in her heart. Her brother did not even show any extra expression when killing people. What kind of guest could possibly make even the Empire's most noble duke show such wariness? Just as the girl was lost in thought, the butler in front of her suddenly stopped walking. With a thud, Little Mint rubbed the corner of her forehead where she had bumped it, and when she looked up, she saw a man with a vicious face. She instantly froze in place, not knowing what to do. Fortunately, the butler reacted quickly and shielded the girl behind him. He loudly rebuked the messenger for barging into the inner residence without the Duke's permission. He then furiously demanded to know from the knights nearby why they had not stopped the man. The knights were left speechless by the questioning, but on the face of that vicious count appeared a slow, fake smile. Arrogantly, he declared that he was a messenger of His Majesty. In this land, no one could defy His Majesty's orders. After saying that, he revealed an utterly disgusting expression and told the butler to know his place and immediately kneel before him to beg for mercy. Little Mint was terrified. She had no idea how to refuse such an excessive demand. She curled herself up as much as possible, yet that trace of mint-colored long hair still caught the Count's attention. The man's expression was like that of a lewd pervert. Pleased, he said that today he had finally met the Duke's honored adopted daughter. By order of the Empress, Miss Mint was invited to the palace for a date. Little Mint was terrified. She had no idea how to refuse such an excessive demand. Just then, a voice so cold it was terrifying sounded from behind the messenger. "Who allowed you to see her?" The Count, who had been so overbearing a moment ago, instantly lost the arrogance he had shown toward the butler. He fawningly tried to curry favor with the Duke. However, Urius's dark expression did not ease in the slightest. If he dared set his sights on his little princess, then he should not blame him for showing no mercy. Her brother's timely appearance instantly soothed all of the girl's unease. She curiously peeked out and saw that her brother had already drawn the long sword in his hand. Just how strong could the possessiveness of a sister-obsessed brother be? Urius pulled out his sharp sword without another word. It was this person who had dared covet his precious little sister. With a cold laugh, the Duke pressed his sword against the messenger's throat. The once arrogant Count was instantly so frightened that he nearly wet himself. Seeing the man's miserable state, Little Mint felt especially satisfied, but in order not to make her brother worry, she still quickly followed the butler back to her room. Only after the door closed did the girl's taut nerves finally relax. But the moment she thought of what had just happened, Little Mint could not help showing a worried expression again. She asked Mr. Roll beside her whether her brother might act on impulse and kill the Empress's messenger. Even from that far away, she had been able to feel the Duke's anger. She did not want her brother to suffer bad consequences because of her. The butler, however, looked quite calm. He gently soothed his little mistress, saying that the Duke had only been scaring that person. It was the young lady's current situation that was truly dangerous. Roll carefully explained the current situation to Little Mint in every detail. He told the girl that the current emperor was a lunatic who killed without blinking. By his own strength alone, he had swept across the entire continent. His daughter had once had a brief engagement with the Duke. Who would have thought that now she would set her sights on Little Mint? At this point, the butler indignantly clenched his fists. His little mistress was still just an innocent child. How could that mad monster of an emperor possibly bring himself to do such a thing? Listening to the butler's reckless cursing, Little Mint could not help standing there in a daze. Insulting the emperor was a capital offense. The girl could not help but grow nervous, so she took a deep breath. Then, Imitating Mr. Roll, she also began criticizing the Emperor's faults. The butler was a little puzzled by Little Mint's sudden change, but then saw the girl instantly return to her usual timid appearance, her tiny body trembling slightly, yet she still pretended to be brave as she said that she was now an accomplice in insulting the Emperor too. The girl's adorable reaction made Roll's heart feel warm. However, from the corner of his eye, he noticed the yellow daffodils placed at the head of the bed. The vivid bouquet seemed to be wrapped in a faint purple mist. At a glance, it was clear that someone with ill intentions had cast hypnotic magic on it. Although he did not know who had tampered with it in secret, the butler still decided it would be best to destroy it as soon as possible. Watching the butler's unusual behavior, Little Mint fell into thought. Everyone else treated Roll with great respect. Perhaps he had some special identity unknown to others. This young girl was actually about to be taken into the harem by the mad old emperor. Although her sister-obsessed brother was doing everything he could to stop the Empress's scheme, all kinds of uncertain dangers still lurked around Little Mint. To protect his sister's safety, Urion specially assigned Kamen, the finest knight in the order, to serve as the girl's guard. Little Mint obediently greeted the newly arrived big brother, and her polite manner instantly captured the young man's heart. He familiarly told his little mistress to just call him by his name. Just as Little Mint was hesitating over whether to speak, the butler beside them made the very same request, and the way the two of them secretly competed looked just like they were jealously vying for favor. Although she did not know why they cared so much about the form of a dress, Little Mint still obediently nodded. She curiously asked Roll why her brother had suddenly assigned a knight to her. The butler's expression immediately turned grave. He told the girl that the daffodil he had destroyed earlier had been enchanted with malicious magic. Judging from the current situation, that flower had very likely been sent by the Emperor. That monster of an Empress not only possessed astonishing combat power, but her magical talent was also breathtaking. Little Mint had originally still been somewhat worried about her situation, but when she heard the butler once again cursing the exalted Emperor, the girl immediately threw herself forward, without caring about appearances. She climbed right onto Roll's lap. With her soft little hands, she did not forget to tightly cover the man's mouth. Little Mint flusteredly explained to Kamen beside them that whenever Butler Brother got nervous, he would imitate a frog's voice and sing, and after saying that, she even seriously let out 2 little ribbits. The girl tried to muddle through with such an absurd and ridiculous lie. Kamen beside them also very cooperatively put on a shocked expression, but in order to see his friend make a fool of himself, he pretended to be serious and said that unless Roll sang the little frog song again, he would not believe it. Seeing his friend's face darken with black lines, Kamen finally realized that his joke had gone too far. He bent down gently and explained to Little Mint that the master he followed was the Duke, not His Majesty. It was precisely because the Duke trusted him that he had been sent to protect the young lady. The man jokingly bantered with Little Mint, but the butler beside them angrily declared that he would corrupt his little mistress like this. Watching them tease and bicker without giving way to each other, Little Mint could not help showing a happy smile. With them here, even if the enemy was the terrifying Emperor, she would not be afraid. However, the girl did not know that an even greater conspiracy was quietly waiting for her. The girl never imagined that she would nearly be killed by her best friend. Just moments ago, Little Mint had still been looking everywhere for Yurion. Although they had kept corresponding by letter during this time, the girl still could not suppress how much she missed that considerate boy. To see him, Little Mint had specially changed into an exquisite dress. She looked so beautiful, like a princess who had stepped out of a fairy tale. She eagerly ran to the places the boy often went, but after searching the entire morning, there was still no sign of Urion. Perhaps he had his own matters to be busy with, just like how her brother had been busy dealing with that sinister Empress lately. Although she really wanted her brother to make time to keep her company, she understood even better that everything the Duke was doing was for her sake. Little Mint felt warm inside. Although her brother looked very cold on the outside, his heart was gentler than anyone else's. No wonder her brother received so many love letters. The curious girl could not help asking the man beside her, why was the Emperor so obsessed with the Agdonia family? Kamen saw the young lady's confusion and patiently explained to Little Mint that the Duke was the world's last remaining dragon-blooded descendant. Not only that, he also controlled the Empire's most important economic lifeline. 70% of the continent's spirit stones came from the Agdonia family. Such influence was enough to make the imperial family wary. Listening to Kamen praise her brother, Little Mint could not help revealing an admiring gaze. So her brother was such an extraordinary existence. But the more that was true, the more inferior Little Mint felt. After all, she was only a pitiful war orphan. If not for her good luck, she might have been sold long ago. Thinking of this, the girl lowered her head sadly, but from the corner of her eye, she noticed a letter that had somehow fallen to the ground. The familiar handwriting made Little Mint's eyes light up. It was a greeting letter written to her by Yurion. The girl carelessly kept the letter with her, completely unaware that danger was quietly approaching. In the blink of an eye, it was time for bed. When Little Mint suddenly remembered the letter she had picked up during the day, she wondered how Yurion was doing in the Knight's Order. Filled with anticipation, she opened the envelope, only to find that there was just one strange line of text on the paper. The beautiful cursive script gave off an eerie glow. As if bewitched, The girl read out the spell written on it. In an instant, an enchanting silver-haired woman appeared before her. This girl had her body stolen by the evil emperor and could only watch helplessly as she climbed onto her brother's bed. Little Mint never imagined that Urion's letter would contain hypnotic magic. As an enchanting woman appeared out of thin air, her consciousness also gradually became blurred. When the girl woke up again, her body had already completely slipped out of her control. Little Mint could only helplessly watch as the Empress, wearing her appearance, acted as she pleased. The knight standing guard through the night did not suspect a thing and took her straight to the Duke's room. The anxious girl shouted desperately from the side, but unfortunately no one could hear her voice. Little Mint could not help but worry about her brother's safety. Although she did not know what the Emperor's purpose was in occupying her body, her intuition told her that her brother might be in danger. Watching the Empress walk naturally into her brother's bedchamber, Little Mint had no choice but to follow in as well. But the moment she entered, she saw fake Mint put on a tearful expression. The girl apologetically said sorry to Urius, and after speaking, even let a crystal-clear tear fall. Little Mint felt utterly hopeless. She would never go crying to her brother over such a trivial matter. Just as Little Mint was thinking about how to return to her own body, the Empress had already cast off the weak appearance from just now. She knelt gracefully on the desk, her figure alluring, yet on her innocent little face hung a seductive smile. Every smile and frown was enough to captivate the soul. Noticing that something was wrong, Urius frowned in displeasure. However, the Empress became even more brazen and leaned against the man's chest. Little Mint was so shocked by the improper scene before her that she did not dare look directly, and she thought in despair. Her brother was definitely going to hate her. Unexpectedly, Urius had actually guessed that the girl before him was not his little princess. Calmly, he asked the maliciously playful Empress what exactly her purpose was in coming to him so late at night. Fake Mint did not answer directly, but instead continued pretending to speak in a child's tone, persuading Urius to send her into the imperial palace. Watching the two of them exchange false words and act against each other, Little Mint felt nothing but shame and indignation so intense that she wanted to disappear on the spot. Heaven knew how awkward it was to watch herself act intimately with the brother she admired. Fortunately, her brother saw through the Empress's scheme in time. From their conversation, Little Mint roughly understood the Empress's intention in trying to win over the Duke. But she had not expected that, after the negotiation failed, the Emperor would actually want to use her body to kill her brother. The girl had her body stolen by the evil Emperor and could only watch helplessly as she went to kill the brother she loved most. Although fake Mint's acting was flawless, Urius still saw through her at a glance. But in order not to let his sister get hurt, he could only keep playing along with the Empress. Yet the scheming Emperor clearly had no intention of letting this hard-won opportunity slip away. With irresistible charm, she pressed the man against a bedside and asked the Duke in a coquettish voice whether he had broken off his engagement to the princess because he had fallen in love with her younger self. Watching the Empress spout nonsense while wearing her own face, Little Mint stood to the side, blushing crimson with embarrassment. However, she did not expect that her brother would deliberately avoid the Empress's question. The man grabbed Fake Mint's hands in one swift motion. With an expressionless face, he stated his position of remaining neutral. He thought that the Empress, having failed in the negotiation, would stop there. However, Urius never expected that the evil Emperor would come up with a mutually destructive solution. He saw a giant silver python slowly emerge from her mouth. Like prey caught in coils, it tightly locked around the Duke's throat. The man frowned slightly under the suppression of the powerful spiritual force. But in order not to harm his sister's body, he could only rely on his own will to endure the Empress's attack. Seeing Urius in such a miserable state, Fake Mint's lips had already curled into a sinister smile. She pointed a sharp hairpin at herself and arrogantly declared that if the Duke would not help her secure the throne, then she would make this innocent girl spill her blood on the spot. Little Mint thought her brother would never agree to such an unreasonable demand, but to her surprise, the man agreed without even thinking. The girl widened her eyes in shock, for she had never known that she was actually so important in her brother's heart. But when she thought of her brother being dragged down by her and forced to do something he did not want to do, Little Mint's heart became unbearably heavy. All this time, it had always been her brother protecting her. This time, it was her turn to protect her brother. With that thought, the frail little girl made a bold decision. She screamed for the Empress to get out of her body. In an instant, black mist swept in like a raging storm. Such terrifying magic power made even the mighty Empress tremble. She had only heard of the same situation in battlefield rumors from several years ago. This mysterious power was enough to flatten the entire nation. Left with no choice, the Empress could only retreat for the time being, and Little Mint finally took back her own body. However, in the very next second, a large amount of blood suddenly gushed from her mouth. In order to save her beloved brother, the girl had actually bitten off her own tongue. Little Mint had taken back her body from the Empress through sheer determination. However, deep within her soul, she could still feel a presence that still belonged to the other party. Perhaps that evil Emperor had merely hidden herself temporarily. But in order to keep her brother from being threatened again, she decided to drive that woman completely out of her body. The clever girl recalled what the Empress had said when threatening her brother, that now she and the mad Emperor shared pain. Thinking of this, Little Mint's gaze became resolute. She bit down hard on her own tongue. Only then did the Empress realize the girl's mad action and immediately sensed danger in her heart. She then severed her connection with this body. The unfamiliar presence disappeared completely. Little Mint knew she had succeeded, but the sharp pain coming from her tongue hurt so much that she could not speak. Large patches of blood stained the bedsheets red. His little princess was about to die, and Urius stared at the scene before him in shock. The man let out a heart-rending howl, while Little Mint only felt the surrounding sounds grow farther and farther away, her heavy body seeming to sink into a bottomless lake. And in the girl's mind, another eerie voice surfaced. It wantonly mocked Little Mint's cowardice and incompetence, as if it wanted to drag this dying girl into the abyss. "Stop talking, get out of my head." Little Mint struggled in agony. When she opened her eyes, she saw Mr. Roll gazing at her anxiously. The man's face was pale and haggard. The moment he saw the girl wake up, he immediately revealed a joyful expression. Little Mint still could not quite make sense of the current situation. She vaguely remembered biting her tongue to drive the Empress out of her body. Now, she was not only completely fine, but did not even have a single wound. Little Mint could not help but suspect that what happened that night had been some strange dream. However, the butler's words shocked Little Mint beyond measure. Everything that happened last night was real. Not only that, the girl had completely bitten off her own tongue. Roll felt both angry and heartbroken. How could his little master disregard her own safety so completely? If it had been any later, this well-behaved girl would already have become a cold corpse. Faced with the butler's reproach, Little Mint could only apologize helplessly, for it was her carelessness that had given the Emperor a chance to take advantage. She had nearly plunged her brother into terrible danger. As the girl spoke, she lowered her head, yet what awaited her was not the man's blame. Only a warm, large hand gently rested on the top of her head. Roll softly comforted Little Mint, saying that none of this was her fault, that this was merely the struggle of adults. None of this was her fault. His rich, magnetic voice dispelled all of the girl's unease. Little Mint still did not know that her brother, in the fury of his rage, was about to take revenge on the evil Empress. After his younger sister had been driven to bite off her tongue in despair, the enraged brother decided to take revenge on the evil Empress. Ignoring the guards' attempts to stop him, Urius forced his way all the way to the Empress's bedchamber. Then came a loud bang, and the heavy door instantly split apart, leaving a huge hole more than 2 meters tall. Urius strode in as if no one else existed, his powerful aura frightening the guards so much that none of them dared step forward. Before the Empress could even speak, the man let out a sinister, cold laugh first. Without the slightest courtesy, he sneered at the Emperor with biting sarcasm, saying he had not expected that even she would one day flee from battle out of fear of pain. Knowing she was in the wrong, the Emperor silently changed the subject, yet her utterly unconcerned expression only further ignited Urius's fury. His sister had nearly died because of the Empress's cruel game, and this person still had the leisure to sit here drinking tea. At that thought, Urius struck the seat beneath him and split half of it apart with one palm. The flying stone fragments shot straight toward the Empress's throne like arrows. The atmosphere instantly became tense, yet the Emperor did not become angry because of it. She calmly asked Urius whether that girl was still alive, because otherwise, given the Duke's vindictive nature, she would already have lost her head by now. The Empress leisurely took a sip of black tea. A smile of complete confidence appeared on her face. If she had guessed correctly, Urius must have used the power of a mage to treat his sister. According to their former agreement, mages were not allowed to use magic outside the Holy Temple, and the Grand Duke's actions had already seriously affected the relationship between the Ekdonia family and the Holy Temple. The Empress could not help but feel pleased with herself. She had originally only wanted to use Little Mint to threaten the Duke into signing a contract, but unexpectedly, the girl's injury had forced the Duke to stand in the same camp as her, which was the outcome she most wanted to see. The Emperor teasingly mocked the man, asking whether he really liked underage children, as the rumors said. These words, unsurprisingly, touched Urius's reverse scale, and the man angrily slammed the table as he rose. In an instant, the seat beneath him shattered into pieces, and he could not tolerate others. He could not tolerate others insulting his little princess, while the Empress still maintained that hypocritical fake smile, and before she could give an order, a man clad in armor from head to toe appeared behind Urius, like a ghost. The long sword wrapped in spiritual force rang sharply the moment it made contact, and 2 generations of swordsmanship masters were about to cross blades. The calculating Empress hurried forward to break up the fight. To make an enemy of Urius now was not a wise choice. For the stability of her throne, she had no choice but to compromise for the time being. The Empress promised to grant the Duke supreme power and wealth. However, Urius coldly refused her. The only thing the man wanted now was to make the Empress taste the pain of a severed tongue, just like his sister had. How terrifying could a sister-obsessed mad protector become once enraged? In order to avenge his sister, Urius was actually planning to rebel directly. He coldly stated that he could accept cooperation with the royal family, but the condition was that the Empress must cut off her own tongue as compensation. The man coldly curled the corner of his lips. He knew that in the current situation, the Empress would definitely compromise with him. Sure enough, this madwoman spat out a blood-soaked lump of flesh from her mouth. She calmly handed half of her severed tongue to Urius. However, the Empress's ingratiating manner did not please the Duke. After taking the lump of rotten flesh, the man immediately crushed it to pieces. He warned the Empress not to set her sights on Little Mint again, or else he could start a war at any time. By the time Urius returned to the residence, it was already close to evening. The afterglow of the setting sun fell upon Little Mint. The girl looked at her brother somewhat timidly, yet before her words of apology could leave her mouth, the man first raised his hand and pinched his sister's soft cheek, gently telling Little Mint to open her mouth and make an ah sound. Then, he carefully examined the girl's injuries inside and out, and the doting brother casually moved her tongue around. The shy girl blushed all the way to her fingertips. At such a close distance, she even worried that her brother would notice the smell in her mouth. Fortunately, the examination did not last too long. Urius gently wiped away the moisture at the corner of the girl's lips and casually reminded his little sister that the human tongue was the most sensitive part of the entire body. If there had not happened to be a mage in the residence who could treat her, she might have died right in front of him. Her brother's tone suddenly became stern. This made Little Mint swallow nervously in fear, with tears gathering in her eyes. Seeing this, Urius could not bear to continue scolding her. He turned around helplessly, wanting the girl to come over and eat something. However, Little Mint interpreted his back as disappointment, and she said helplessly that she had caused her brother to be affected by the Empress's magic, and her foolishness had nearly gotten herself killed. And the root of all this was that she had not trusted the brother she loved most. At the moment she was kidnapped, Urius had already told her to trust the head of the Adonia family. No matter where she was, he would do everything in his power to save her. Little Mint lowered her head in shame. She had forgotten her brother's vow. After her body had been taken by the vicious emperor, even though her brother had been right beside her, she had chosen to hurt herself. To resolve the crisis, a deep sense of frustration surged in Urius's heart. His little princess actually did not trust him, and the man could not help but reflect on whether he had failed too badly as an older brother. Yet he did not expect that his sister would actually apologize to him. Because of this, tears welled in the girl's eyes. The anger Urius had built up vanished into thin air in an instant. He turned and walked to his sister. The man tried his best to make himself look gentler as he told his sister that if the emperor wanted to sign a contract, she would have to summon her true body. He had originally planned to drive the emperor out at that moment. Little Mint's heart trembled. It was her self-righteousness that had made things worse. Urius saw the struggle in his sister and continued. If the emperor failed this time, she would continue approaching you in the future, so solving it while taking advantage of the chance would actually have been a good thing. The man deliberately raised his tone as he told Little Mint that even if he signed a contract with the emperor, that would still be his decision. And in his heart, nothing was more important than his little sister. After saying that, Urius knelt on one knee before the girl like a knight. He looked at his sister intently. Am I still not enough to earn your trust? Her brother's voice was like a deep cello. Little by little, it soothed the girl's unease, and she wanted to tell her brother loudly that it was not like that. It was her brother who had pulled her out of hell and given her a privileged life, and a family who would cherish her. But another voice in her mind refuted her at every moment. Every time danger came, the girl always wanted to solve it by herself, but she had never thought about how heartbroken her brother would be if she died. Little Mint clenched her hands tightly. She did not dare raise her head to look into her brother's eyes. She was a useless child. This time, being possessed by the Empress was the same. She could not help with anything and would only cause trouble for others, but she wanted her brother's approval too much. Otherwise, what right did she have to stay by the Duke's side? Little Mint's voice was choked with sobs as she told her brother that she wanted to become someone useful to him and that this was not his fault. It was she herself who had been too reckless. The girl had originally thought her brother would scold her. He only carefully opened her clenched hands. His golden eyes were full of heartache. He had never had any other expectations of Little Mint. No matter what his sister was like, he would love her. There was no reason, nor was there any need for one. Such a confession made the girl forget to cry. She stared blankly at the brother before her. The man returned her a serious look. If there truly was any expectation, then he would rather that his little sister live on in good health. At this moment, Little Mint felt that the whole world had become vivid and bright. Her eyes brimmed with tears, not from sadness, nor from grievance. They were tears of happiness. The girl's petite body threw itself into her brother's arms. She cried her heart out, as if venting all the grievances she had endured over the past dozen years. Urius could not help trembling all over. Somewhat stiffly, he gently patted his sister's back. After an unknown amount of time, Little Mint finally cried herself out and quietly nestled in her brother's arms. That warmth made her feel as if she had returned to her mother's swaddling clothes. The girl still did not know that her feelings toward her brother were quietly beginning to change. She was a beloved little princess adored by everyone, yet she had a childhood as miserable as hell. From the time Little Mint could remember, she had been locked away in a remote orphanage. At the slightest disobedience, she would be brutally beaten by the headmaster. That day, a heavy snowstorm began to fall. The drunken man was contentedly warming himself by the fireplace. But the moment he saw Little Mint, he flew into a rage. He viciously berated her for ruining his good mood. The trembling and timid girl could only keep kneeling and begging for mercy. Even so, she was still locked outside in the freezing cold. The girl cried helplessly, and as the man's voice had long since sounded from inside the room, she despaired, thinking she was about to die. But then she heard a soft and faint meow coming from the corner. It turned out to be a kitten that was nearly frozen stiff. The girl used her own feeble body heat to warm it. Perhaps huddling together still could not block out the biting wind, but at least they could go together into God's embrace. A strange man appeared before Little Mint. The man shielded her from the raging wind and snow, but the girl, who was on the verge of freezing to death, only lowered her head and said nothing. She knew she was a useless child. Maybe only by dying would she stop causing trouble for others, and the girl instinctively hugged herself tighter. Meanwhile, the man had already taken the long-dead kitten from her arms, and Little Mint looked up blankly. She could barely feel her own body. Perhaps it would not be long before her soul, too, left this cruel world, and the girl waited for death in despair. Yet, unexpectedly, she saw a ray of bright sunlight. She stiffly raised her head and saw the dead kitten affectionately licking the man's cheek. A gentle voice sounded above her head. "Our God will not abandon us." Little Mint suddenly jolted awake from her dream. It had been a long time since she had dreamed about the orphanage. Perhaps her conversation with her brother yesterday had affected her. Before this, the girl had always felt that being hypnotized by the Empress was her own fault. But her brother's words had awakened her. She should not blame every mistake on herself. She had even thought that if she just disappeared, all the problems would be solved. Those thoughts were actually a form of escape. Just like the orphanage headmaster's abuse was not her fault, and that vicious man had long since received the punishment he deserved. Only at this moment did Little Mint truly understand that her brother had always been using his own way. Her brother had always been using his own way to teach her the truths of life. Perhaps Urion was not good at expressing himself, but in Little Mint's heart, he was the best brother in the whole world. Thinking of this, the girl prepared to get out of bed. However, she felt a damp and sticky sensation from the hem of her skirt. Puzzled, she lifted the blanket, only to discover that her clothes were already stained with dark red blood. The hem of the girl's skirt had also been soaked through with blood. Little Mint thought she had some incurable disease, but when the maid saw it, her face lit up with excitement. As it turned out, this was menstruation, something every girl experiences after reaching a certain age. Bleeding meant that she had already become a grown-up who could have babies. She had previously been worried about Milady's health. Now it seemed that the care and nourishment during this period had indeed been a good thing. None of it had been in vain. The maid's explanation clearly exceeded Little Mint's understanding. She had always thought that children were all sent by the goddess Tamara. That was why she had asked her brother how many children he planned to have in the future. The girl's cheeks instantly flushed red with embarrassment. The maid beside her was also amused by her young mistress's innocent reaction and burst into laughter. She told the girl that she absolutely had to keep warm during this period, and after saying that, she went to prepare soft sleepwear and a warm hot water bottle. Only then did Little Mint feel the uncomfortable heaviness in her lower abdomen. Even her lower back ached faintly, unbearably so. She had no choice but to obediently lie back down on the bed. And meanwhile, the maid immediately reported Milady's condition to the Duke, and she hoped that the Duke could prepare some brightly colored flowers. The man froze on the spot, thinking the maid wanted flowers for medicine. He quickly asked about his sister's condition with concern. The maid helplessly waved her hand and told the Duke that there was nothing wrong with Milady's body. Having her period was, on the contrary, a sign that her body was getting better. Only then did Urion let out a sigh of relief. Finding flowers in winter was indeed somewhat difficult, but since they were for his sister, he could also have the mages try to make some, even if it would arouse the displeasure of the temple, as long as his sister was happy. He was willing to do anything. Just then, Knight Kamen suddenly burst in. He set an alarm that the temple had sent people to inspect, and their purpose was to question them about the last time a mage had violated the rules while treating the young princess. Urion instantly revealed an extremely grim expression. The steel pen in his hand also snapped in two with a crack under his force. Those temple scum actually dared to step all over the Ecdonia family. Then they could not blame him for being ruthless. Urion led a group of holy knights to the castle gate, and a man dressed like a priest's attendant had already been waiting there for quite some time. The moment he saw the Duke, The man immediately began questioning him in an arrogant tone. But Urius kept a dark expression on his face the entire time. If it had not been for his sister, he would have chopped this man's head off on the spot. Compared with all the excessive things the temple had done to him, not having this holy emperor's lackey cut into 1,000 pieces was already the utmost mercy. Blood flowed from the delicate girl's body. However, her brother and the temple were on the verge of war. At the critical moment, Little Mint had no choice but to step forward. Because of her period, her body was still somewhat weak. But in order to keep her brother from being wronged by the high priest, the girl decided to take all the blame upon herself. She gracefully lifted the hem of her skirt and politely introduced herself to the man as the young princess. That poised and unwavering manner immediately caught the high priest's attention. The man hypocritically extended his hand toward Little Mint. Urius immediately stepped between them in disgust. He did not want this filthy man to touch his precious sister. The duke's cold attitude instantly enraged the arrogant high priest. Furious, he heavily struck the ground with his staff. Staring angrily, he rebuked the man for not following proper decorum. But Urius became even angrier. The veins on the back of his hand bulged violently. These scum who had killed his parents actually still dared to brazenly barge into the duke's residence. Then they had better be prepared to die here. At that moment, a cruel plan surfaced in his mind. Urius turned around coldly and told the high priest that he could accept the inspection, but on one condition. Only the man himself could investigate, and he would have only 3 days. Although the high priest was furious, he could only reluctantly agree. Little Mint, who knew nothing of this, could not help feeling puzzled. Why did her brother hate the temple so much? So after returning to the residence, she immediately sought out Kamen, wanting to understand what had happened back then. From the servant's account, the girl learned of the tragic past hidden beneath her brother's gentle exterior. Back then, the temple had wanted to seize the spirit stone mine belonging to the Ecdonia family, but the old duke had refused to go along with those charlatans. So the temple, enraged and humiliated, struck viciously from the shadows, pretending to invite the duke to take part in a mysterious ritual. Yet along the way, they had ambushed him with dozens of foreign assassins who killed without hesitation. On that cold, snowy night, the young Urius could do nothing but watch his beloved family die before his eyes. Kamen was not very clear either on how he had ultimately survived, but from that day on, the Ecdonia family completely broke with the temple. It was said that after this case occurred, the matter was ultimately dropped without resolution. The temple even attributed it all to bad luck. So in the end, it could only be said that Urius's parents had bad luck. After hearing this, Little Mint was furious. She wished she could personally teach that androgynous priest a lesson for her brother's sake. At this moment, the girl was filled with regret. If she had known about her brother earlier, she definitely would not have rashly gone to offer greetings. However, Kamen playfully winked at Milady. Her performance at the time had been incredibly cool. It was as if she were telling the perpetrators that the Ecdonia family would not fall so easily. Though comforted, the girl still covered her ears gloomily. Danger was quietly approaching, and facing her brother's enemy, the furious girl had completely darkened. Just now, Little Mint had still been struggling over whether she should apologize to her brother for what happened yesterday. She had not meant to interrupt Urius's revenge. It was only because the situation had been too urgent at the time. That was why she had stopped the Duke and the temple from going to war. The girl gloomily rubbed her sore and weak waist. Because she was worried that her brother was angry, she had barely slept last night. The real culprit behind all of this was that loathsome high priest. Unexpectedly, that shameless man actually took the initiative to come to her door. Coletto revealed a hypocritical fake smile. He warmly took the initiative to show goodwill toward the girl, but his greasy manner made Little Mint feel sick inside, and she could only force herself not to show her disgust. Yet this obscene man insisted on pestering Little Mint with conversation. He said he wanted to perform an astonishing magic trick for the girl, and Little Mint could not help being stunned. According to the rules, mages were not allowed to. So why was the man in front of her allowed to do whatever he pleased? After hearing the girl's question, Coletto could not help sneering. He said that someone as righteous and enlightened as himself did not need to be bound by rules. His arrogant expression carried a look of utter contempt. Little Mint was instantly enraged by the man's double standards, and she raised her head with hollow eyes. She told him to perform a magic trick that would make him disappear completely from the Duke's residence. The girl's undisguised disgust instead piqued the priest's interest. With a lewd grin, he praised Little Mint's admirable courage. At the same time, he revealed a strangely shaped ring. A light suddenly shone up around both of them at once. The man tightly grabbed the girl's shoulders. He intended to abduct Little Mint directly from the Duke's residence. Not to mention how much their deep sibling bond was an eyesore. Just judging by Urius's concern for his sister, they could completely use the girl as a hostage and as a bargaining chip to threaten the Duke. However, from Little Mint's body, the High Priest sensed a sinister fluctuation of magic. That powerful force even sent a chill down his spine. But how could someone as greedy as he was possibly give up such easy prey delivered right to his mouth? According to the doctrine of their temple, magic is a power bestowed upon humanity by the goddess. People like Little Mint, who are born with magical power, must belong to the temple. So, no matter what, he had to take the girl away. A blade that appeared out of thin air was instantly pressed against the man's throat. The evil priest was preparing to offer the girl to the Holy Emperor when, at the critical moment, Kamen drew his sword. He stopped Kaleto's scheme. The hot-tempered man was immediately furious. He angrily rebuked Kamen, saying that doing this would bring down the temple's curse. Yet the brave young man stood in front of Little Mint without yielding in the slightest. Seeing that the situation had reached a stalemate, the despicable priest actually used the temple to pressure the duke's household, and his gaze gradually turned sinister. In a commanding tone, he barked at Little Mint, telling her to accept the inspection. Having magical power meant becoming a slave of the temple. Even members of the Ekdonia family were no exception. After saying that, Kaleto strode forward, preparing to take Little Mint away by force. The man was certain that Kamen could do nothing to stop him, but he did not expect that a sharp blade had already slashed hard across his hand. The priest, stung by pain, suddenly retreated. Humiliated and enraged, he immediately used magic to attack Kamen in front of him. An unbearable stinging and itching sensation instantly spread across the young man's face. But even so, he still stood firmly protecting Little Mint behind him, unless he died. Otherwise, no one could harm his little master. Kaleto still wanted to continue berating the knight before him. However, brave Little Mint had already stepped forward on her own initiative, fearlessly declaring that it was the priest who had attacked her first. And she also refused to undergo any magical examination. The girl's resolute attitude left the priest with no choice but to back down for the moment. But now, his heart was full of fury with nowhere to vent it. Just then, Urion, who had just finished training, passed by the corridor. From afar, he saw the girl he loved being viciously bullied. The boy dangerously narrowed his eyes, and just as he was planning how to retaliate against this overbearing priest, Kaleto actually pulled Urion in front of him on his own initiative. He deliberately picked a fight, wanting to vent all the dissatisfaction in his heart. But he did not know that his actions had played right into the boy's hands. The man slammed the staff in his hand heavily against the ground, yet Urion merely shifted slightly to the side and easily dodged his attack. Because of this, the priest became even angrier, and at this moment, Urion was already fully prepared to strike back. Pretending to be dull-witted, he said the man could hit him however he wanted, and that he would not dodge. Facing the priest's fist, Urion did not move an inch, yet the pain he had expected did not fall on him. Instead, he saw the girl he loved collapse straight in front of him. The beautiful girl had actually been struck in the face by the priest on the spot, and blood ran down Little Mint's cheek. Drip by drip, it fell to the ground. Seeing this, everyone around panicked, but unrepentant, he turned around and pushed all the blame onto Little Mint. Urius, his expression dark, was already standing behind him. She was bleeding. The man's icy voice instantly extinguished the priest's arrogant swagger. And at this moment, the Duke also noticed the bloodstains left on Kaleto's ring. So it was you. Then there was a loud bang. The originally overbearing priest was instantly kicked hard into the wall. Seeing Kaleto beaten so badly that he was left groveling on the floor, Little Mint felt extremely satisfied. But this person was, after all, a representative of the temple. If anything happened to him in the Duke's residence, it would ultimately be hard to explain. Kamen at the side had the same concern. He carefully urged the Duke to calm down a little. However, Urius had already completely lost his reason because of his younger sister. His little princess had actually been injured and was bleeding. Then the other party should pay back blood with blood. He grabbed the battered priest off the ground in one fierce motion, but the incorrigible man was still shouting curses, threatening the Duke's household. So before Kaleto could use magic to heal himself, Urius's fist smashed into that infuriating face of his once again. The man fell to the ground, barely alive. If no one stopped him now, he really would be beaten to death by the Duke. Kamen beside them had no choice but to loudly remind him that the little young lady was still watching nearby. Only then, thinking of how worried his sister must be, did Urius barely regain a trace of reason. He gently knelt on one knee in front of the girl, tenderly using his fingertips to wipe the blood from his sister's cheek. It feels like it will leave a scar. Doesn't it hurt? Little Mint hurriedly shook her head, smiling as she comforted her brother. It doesn't hurt, and even if it really leaves a scar, it will still look cool. Little did she know that her forced optimism only made Urius feel even more heartbroken. The angry brother was on the verge of losing control again when, fortunately, the butler, Mr. Roll, appeared in time. Little Mint immediately cast him a pleading look. Unexpectedly, the butler actually asked the Duke why the high priest had not been killed yet. After saying that, he tightened his leather gloves as if preparing to do it himself, watching his beloved younger sister get injured in the face with his own eyes. The furious brother finally went completely berserk. Urius nearly smashed Kaleto's skull to pieces, yet this stubborn man still struggled to get back up. With a vicious attitude, he demanded to know whether the Duke intended to rebel. Urius sneered on the spot and retorted, "What do you think? I happen to like fighting very much." His expression was terrifyingly sinister. This made the high priest involuntarily recall that bloody incident in the forest 10 years ago, that expressionless little boy, covered in blood from head to toe. Yet relying on his own strength alone, he killed several tall, burly adult men. At that time, Urius was like a demon crawling out of hell. And at this moment, he once again revealed that terrifying side of himself. His every blow was lethal, crashing down on the high priest like a rainstorm. And being beaten until his face was swollen and bruised, he could only defend himself miserably. Seeing Urius's fist about to smash into his face, the panicked Coletto immediately fired back with a strange magical orb. But he had no idea that this kind of ordinary spell was no match for the Duke at all. Urius, whose eyes were red with bloodlust, merely slashed casually with one hand. The huge orb instantly shattered into pieces. However, the splintering magical fragments flew out of control toward Little Mint. At the critical moment, Mr. Roll, he decisively raised his right hand, and a transparent protective barrier instantly enveloped everyone inside. Only then did Little Mint realize that the butler, who had been hiding his abilities, was actually a highly respected mage. No wonder that after she woke up when she had turned back, the first person she saw was Roll. And no matter who it was in the Duke's residence, everyone respectfully addressed him as Mr. Roll. Little Mint felt annoyed at her own ignorance, but then she heard the sounds of fighting outside the barrier grow even more intense. Just as she was hesitating over whether she should go help her brother, the chaotic noise abruptly came to a stop at that very moment. The girl nervously held her breath, only to see her brother walk calmly out of the rising dust and smoke, dragging the once arrogant high priest, whom he held in his hand like a dead dog. In the end, the Duke still decided to spare the man's life. He did not want his little princess to witness such a bloody scene. However, after his anger subsided, all of Urius's attention fell on his younger sister. Such a deep wound. What if it really left a scar? They were clearly brother and sister, yet the brother spoiled her as if she were his girlfriend. He even did not hesitate to let the entire family become enemies of the temple. Urius ordered his men to throw the high priest, who had only one breath left, onto a cart full of manure. Although he did not beat Coletto to death, this was enough to make the arrogant temple lose all face. Only after calming down did the man notice that the wound on his sister's face had still not been treated. He immediately told Roll to use magic to heal Little Mint. After receiving the order, the butler immediately stepped in front of the girl. He thoughtfully told his little master to close her eyes. Then a gentle holy light burst forth from the man's hands, and her cheek felt warm. It was as if an invisible force was slowly helping her wound heal. Could this be the legendary healing magic? The girl remembered that the high priest had also said just now that she likewise possessed magical power. Just as the girl was still thinking about whether this was true or false, Roll had already smoothly finished the treatment. The girl's beautiful little face had also returned to a flawless perfection like white porcelain. But the worried butler still repeatedly confirmed whether his little master had been injured anywhere else, and Little Mint hurriedly shook her head nervously. Compared with herself, she was actually more worried about her brother's condition. That night, Little Mint, unsurprisingly, suffered from insomnia, because for her sake, the Duke had gotten into a fierce fight with the priest. Although her brother had been the one holding the upper hand the whole time, the girl was still worried that he might be hurt. And after the high priest left, her brother had not been able to rest either. Instead, he had hurried back to deal with official business. Thinking of this, Little Mint felt an urgent impulse to see her brother. So, under the guidance of the night watch knight, the girl came to the door of the study. She quietly pushed open the door, but still disturbed Urius, who was working inside. The man raised his brows in displeasure, but after seeing that it was his sister, he immediately softened his voice. "Can't you sleep?" She nodded obediently. The documents on her brother's desk were piled up like a small mountain, and the empty chair newly placed in the study seemed to be waiting for some guest. Thinking of all this, Little Mint could not help regretting this rash visit of hers. That way, perhaps her brother might have been able to sleep a little longer. Yet Urius had already come before her and stretched out his hands, as if he wanted to gently pick her up, yet after hesitating for a few seconds, the man instead withdrew his hands. Little Mint did not ask too much about her brother's unusual behavior. However, she did not know that her brother's former fiancé had already arrived downstairs. His own younger sister actually had someone she liked, so her brother had no choice but to withdraw the hands that wanted to hug her. Urius deeply missed the days when he used to carry Little Mint around in his arms. At that time, his sister had still been such a tiny little thing, but now, she was already a grown young lady who could be married off. The sister-obsessed man felt melancholy. He tried hard to keep his attention on the documents in his hands, but then he heard his sister's soft and sweet voice ask, "We won't go to war with the temple, right?" Urius's pen paused, and he did not want to tell his sister this cruel truth, but he knew clearly that there would inevitably be a battle between them and the temple. Seeing his sister's panicked expression, Urius had no choice but to soften his tone. He told his sister that even if war really did break out, it would not be her fault. Unexpectedly, Little Mint's voice gradually took on a sobbing tone. What she cared about was not whether there would be a war. Rather, she was worried that her brother would be hurt because of it. Seeing his sister on the verge of tears, Urius gently patted the top of her head. His gentle gaze seemed to tell Little Mint not to worry, but the sensitive girl still read from her brother's expression the hatred he felt toward the temple. Perhaps if they kept talking, her brother's mood would only worsen. So, the clever Little Mint promptly changed the subject. She asked her brother about magical power, or rather, if everything the high priest said was true, then wouldn't that mean she was going to become a very powerful magical girl? However, her brother's words poured cold water over Little Mint. It turned out that people who could use magic were not rare. The level of magic power within one's body was the key to becoming a great mage. Her brother told her that if she wanted to confirm her magic power level, she could ask Mr. Roll for help. But Little Mint obediently shook her head. She could roughly guess that the magical power inside her was probably very weak, and in that case, it would be better not to know. And as long as she stayed by her brother's side, she would not need to use magic at all. The girl showed a sweet smile. However, the anxious butler suddenly came in at this moment. Her Highness, the princess, has arrived. Hearing this news, Urius sprang to his feet. Even Little Mint at the side could feel the vigilance radiating from her brother. If she remembered correctly, her brother and this princess seemed to have once been engaged. Then perhaps she should avoid the meeting. Just as Little Mint was preparing to leave, Urius stopped her from behind. The Duke, who loved only his sister, was actually meeting his former fiancée in the middle of the night. And although it was clearly a meeting between two people, he dragged his sister along as well. Little Mint was extremely nervous at the side, yet what she felt even more strongly inside was curiosity. She wanted to know what kind of woman could possibly be worthy of her perfect brother. As the doors of the bedchamber slowly opened, a graceful figure elegantly walked in. The girl's silver-white long hair was like the bright, pure moonlight. Little Mint was deeply amazed by the scene before her. Fortunately, her brother reminded her in time, allowing her to recover from her trance. The girl hurriedly lifted her skirt properly. Neither servile nor overbearing, she curtsied to greet Her Highness the Princess. Her adorably dazed little expression immediately made Arabella laugh. Before coming here, she had heard that Urius had adopted a young war orphan. Sure enough, she was just as cute as the rumors said. You can relax a little. Little Mint was surprised by the feeling the princess gave her, completely different from that crazy Empress. Standing together with her brother, they looked just like a prince and princess from a fairy tale, and she herself seemed like the ugly duckling at the side. The girl inexplicably felt a bit inferior. Perhaps it was time for her to leave, but to her surprise, her brother actually had her sit beside him. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became strangely awkward, and Little Mint nervously clenched the hem of her clothes, while Her Highness the Princess affectionately called her brother Yuri. The way they chatted and laughed made it seem as though she were the true mistress of the ducal household. However, Little Mint did not know that there had never been any feelings beyond friendship between Urius and this former fiancé. In fact, the two of them were merely political partners bound by mutual interests. To keep his little sister from misunderstanding, the Duke had the girl stay behind, yet unexpectedly, doing so only made Little Mint feel even worse, especially when the princess's teasing tone toward him sounded as if she were deliberately trying to make the girl misunderstand that they were just friends. So for the first time, Urius rashly interrupted the princess. He very directly asked the young woman what exactly her purpose was in visiting so late at night. The princess, who had just been joking around, immediately put on a serious expression. She said that she was representing the temple and had come to request mediation. Urius also shifted into a negotiating stance. He asked the princess to first explain the conditions offered by the temple, and as the smell of gunpowder in the air grew stronger and stronger, Little Mint was instead left stunned. She was a heretic condemned by everyone, yet her brother had spoiled her into a little princess. Under Urius's deliberate concealment, Little Mint did not know her true identity, and in order to protect the secret that his little sister could use magic, the man had even deliberately added one more clause during the negotiations. If the Igdonia family were to produce another new mage, the temple must not interfere in any way, and as an exchange condition, the Duke needed to issue a public letter of apology to help preserve the temple's dignity. Her Highness the Princess had thought that Urius would firmly refuse without hesitation, but to her surprise, the man agreed without the slightest hesitation. This made Arabella unable to help sighing that after only a year apart, Urius could actually have such a gentle side, and the one who changed him was actually an underage little girl. The princess could not help teasing, saying that sure enough, he liked the petite and adorable type just as the rumor said. The innocent Little Mint did not understand at first, but it was as if she had struck a nerve. In embarrassment and anger, he told the princess not to joke about such things. However, Arabella pulled Little Mint over and began whispering the kind of private talk shared between close girlfriends. She told the girl that the Grand Duke from before would never have been as mature and steady as he was now. Anyone who dared to provoke him in front of him would be beaten until their teeth were scattered all over the ground. So when she heard that Urius had brought a little girl back from the orphanage, she had not believed it at all. But after seeing the warm interaction between the Duke and Little Mint today, she finally understood that she would never become the mistress of the ducal household. Still, out of curiosity, Arabella asked Urius, with a teasing expression. Was adopting Little Mint really meant to train her as an heir? He shook his head seriously. This made Little Mint nervously prick up her ears. However, in the very next second, Urius's expression softened. I only hope that she can live on happily. Her brother's words instantly moved Little Mint until her eyes grew misty with tears. The princess beside them also revealed a gratified smile. The three of them talked and forgot the time. From Her Highness the Princess's recollections, Little Mint learned many embarrassing stories from her brother's youth. And seeing that it was getting late, Arabella also set out on the carriage back to the Imperial Palace. Before she left, Urius kindly reminded her to remember to bring guards next time she went out. But Arabella haughtily reminded the Duke instead. They were no longer in a fiancé-fiancé relationship. After saying that, the speeding carriage gradually disappeared into the night. As for the kind princess, Urius felt only the concern one has for a friend, and his own innocent and adorable little sister was the one he truly cherished above all else. The moment she stepped outside, Little Mint saw Urion lying motionless on the ground. Curious, she quickly trotted over. What came into view was a kitten that had just reached 1 month old, its dusty gray appearance not particularly lovable. Yet the girl loved it dearly. Urion told her that because it was blind in one eye, the kitten's mother had not come by for several days. Little Mint could not help feeling heartbroken. However, from the corner of her eye, she noticed the soft cat fur on Urion's collar. The girl could not help teasing, asking if he had secretly taken the kitten back. Caught out, the boy guiltily looked away, and Little Mint could only sigh helplessly. She did not want Urion to lose his qualification for the Knight Order because of a kitten. Yet she also could not bear to let this tenacious little life freeze to death. So the kind-hearted girl hesitated for a moment. In the end, she still decided to take the kitten away herself. Looking at its pitiful appearance, the girl could not help recalling those miserable days in the orphanage. It seemed to have been just such a cold, snowy day as well. She had nearly frozen to death alone outside the orphanage. Fortunately, that day, a stray cat had stayed with her to keep warm. Luckily, all of that had passed. Little Mint's gaze rested on Urion. She had never found a suitable opportunity. Now she finally had the courage to tell Urion that she was not some naturally noble young lady at all. Just like the boy before her, she too had once been an orphan abandoned by everyone. The dull boy did not know what it meant from a lady to tell him all this, but when he raised his head, he met the girl's radiant smile directly, as if it had the power to melt ice and snow. Urion was stunned for a moment. Little Mint's sweet voice sounded by his ear. From now on, let us think only about becoming happy. The girl's little hand unknowingly came to rest on the back of the boy's hand. Like an oath. Little Mint would become an outstanding young lady, and Urion would also become a handsome knight. In the blink of an eye, time passed, and Little Mint welcomed her 18th birthday. She had shed the immaturity of childhood. Now she had grown even more beautiful. Her impeccable etiquette and extensive knowledge had made her a perfect existence in the eyes of others. Yet even so, at this moment she was troubled by the upcoming ball. Little Mint herself did not know how many times she had stepped on Roll's feet. Seeing the man's pained expression as he endured it, she felt so guilty that she wanted to give up immediately. However, the butler indulgently said that it was all right. He patiently guided Little Mint in turning and leaping across the dance floor, and his gentle tone gradually relaxed the girl's tense nerves. However, with one loss of balance, Little Mint stepped on him again. This time the girl was completely dumbfounded, and even her voice carried a wronged, tearful tone. In just 5 short minutes, she had stepped on Roll no fewer than 5 times. Even though the gentle butler had not uttered a single complaint, Little Mint still refused to continue practicing no matter what. Having no choice, the man could only let the girl rest at the side for a while first. He himself went to prepare some tea to quench her thirst. While Little Mint turned her head away for a moment, Roll secretly healed his injured foot. But the girl at the side suddenly spoke up, "I might not be suited for dancing." Little Mint lowered her eyes in disappointment. This state had already lasted for half a year. She would make mistakes after only a few steps. Although Roll said nothing, he had probably already started to dislike her, hadn't he? Unexpectedly, the butler's serious voice sounded behind her. "Miss, do you remember that when you first came here, you started by learning to read? At that time, you would not even agree to sleep. Now that you have finally gained the qualification to attend the ladies' ball, how can you give up just like this?" Roll gave Little Mint an affirming look. He generously said that since Miss was so outstanding, she would definitely be able to accomplish anything. Encouraged, Little Mint immediately became fired up. She said indignantly that even if she stomped Roll's feet to pieces, she still could not let the family be shamed at the ball. The moment she finished speaking, she was shocked by what she had just said. She had actually spoken her true thoughts out loud, and the girl looked awkwardly at the butler beside her, only to find that Roll's face actually carried excited joy. "You have finally entered your rebellious phase." Little Mint's cheeks instantly turned as red as a ripe apple. She flusteredly explained that she was just a little anxious. However, Roll put on a look as if he were already prepared to accept everything. He actually just wanted Little Mint to be a bit more confident. After all, Their outstanding little princess could surpass all the other noble young ladies in every respect. Little Mint, having finished practicing her dance steps, had just been about to return to her room when a maid who came hurrying over reported to her breathlessly that something had happened on Urion's side. Filled with anxiety, Little Mint hurriedly followed the maid to the street. From a distance, she saw a rough-looking man cursing Urion furiously, and the outnumbered young man could only use words to stop them from causing trouble. Seeing this scene, Little Mint became angry. She strode forward domineeringly and pulled Urion behind her in one motion. Seeing that the one who had come was the noble young lady, the snobbish man instead became even more aggressive in his questioning. How had they trained their knights if they could not even manage the small task of escorting civilians? Now Little Mint was truly angry. What right did this person have to question her brother's ability? Just as the girl was about to lash out, Urion beside her suddenly spoke. Helplessly, he explained the course of events to Little Mint. He had merely gone to the village on routine business. However, on the way back, this strange girl had inexplicably fainted onto his back. Her father had then pushed his luck even further by demanding that he take responsibility for the girl. After hearing Urion's explanation, Little Mint roughly guessed that he had once again run into a strange admirer. As he grew older, Urion's looks had become even more striking. His ruby-like eyes made many girls fall in love with him at first sight. And in addition to his noble status in the Eternal Knight's Order, it was no wonder those commoner girls eagerly threw themselves at him. But looking at the arrogant attitude of the father and daughter before her, Little Mint decided to teach them a small lesson.